Recording started, so I'll jump in and just get us going here. So thank you everyone for attending today. This is great to have so many directors, new and old in their positions attending. It's always good to do a refresher on this topic just because we only do it once every 2 years. So it's just good to take a look with fresh eyes. So we've got a couple of folks from Maine DOE on here, but I'll be doing most of the talking just because this is Perkins grant related. So what else? Feel free to raise your hand if you've got a question. I'm happy to answer them as we go. And we'll save some time at the end for questions too, if you'd prefer to save it till then. I'll do my best to keep the chat open if anybody wants to put anything there. Okay, so the topic today is the FY27 Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment, or CLNA. This is a Perkins requirement every 2 years. So let me just share my screen so y'all can see my PowerPoint. Okay. Let me know if y'all can see that. Good, good, good. Okay. So while FY27 seems really far away, it's actually not that far away. Applications for FY27 for Perkins will come out in the spring. So as a requirement this year, the CLNA needs to be completed before then. So we're getting a jump start on that process. So what is the CLNA? So as part of Perkins 5, there's a section in the actual text of Perkins that every 2 years, all subrecipients, so all secondary CTEs, all the post-secondary colleges that receive Perkins, everyone has to do a local needs assessment. This assessment needs to inform how you're going to spend your Perkins funds for the next 2 years. That's the biggest outcome of the CLNA. I was told a couple weeks ago by one director that I should have retired before the next CLNA was due. So I know the CLNA might seem like another box to check for your Perkins grant, but actually it can be really meaningful in evaluating your CTE programming at your school. So even though it's a requirement, it actually can be a really useful process for you all to go through. So promise it's not just paperwork. It can be really meaningful as long as you put that effort in, right? So the components of the CLNA, there's really 2 basic sections, right? So there's these narrative sections where you're writing responses to certain topics. And then there's the accountability data section. So you'll probably know 1S1, 2S1, all of those Perkins performance indicators. Those are the other big section. Today, we're going to just focus on talking about the narrative component sections. And Sean Legassi on our team is going to do a separate training on accountability data. So any questions on accountability, I can do my best to answer them now, but they might be better held for a training later down the road with Sean. Okay. So let's talk about some benefits besides the requirements of the CLNA under Perkins. What are some of these benefits, right? How can it be purposeful to you? So this is a really good time for you to take stock of CTE programming at your school to help you inform your future decisions, right? So if you're doing any type of strategic planning, any goal setting, this can be a living document that you can revisit and even use as justification moving forward. Since this is a needs assessment, right, you're getting that across the board. You're getting a high level view of what's going on at your school, but you're also taking a more granular look at your programs as well. So it gives you that scale of, goal setting that you can get. This is also an opportunity to engage with your school's stakeholder groups and advisory boards. So as part of Perkins, this is separate from individual PACs. This is your school-wide stakeholder group. So this is going to be, individuals at your school, so administrators, instructors. There's a bunch of different representatives that you need to have, and we can go over those in a little bit. But this is a really good opportunity to touch base with those folks. This is also an opportunity to identify performance gaps in student outcomes. So part of that accountability data, right? It's your real outcomes of how your students are doing, graduation rates, how their test scores are, what they're doing post-grad. This is a good time to look back on that and see where are there gaps in student performance between programs, between identity groups, etc. This is, what have we talked about? Let's see. We talked about aligning goals and setting priorities for your school. And because this is a self-study with evidence in it, right? You can use this as a, not just a moment in time needs assessment, but you can look back year over year at old needs assessments, right? Look back at FY25 needs assessment, look back at FY23 needs assessment, see how things have changed, right? These needs assessments can be used as evidence for change at your school over time. So I'm going to walk through where to find the CLNA. So it is in Grants for Me, as most things are. What you all will see on your left-hand navigation bar in Grants for Me, normally you would go to funding to see your Perkins application. You're going to go to application supplement to view it. Now it's not open yet in the grant system. I will let you know when it's available to complete. So when you go in there, you can see FY25, that local needs assessment. But if you click the drop down to FY27, 2027, you won't see it pop up yet, but you will. I will let you know when it's ready for you all. Okay. So the needs assessment in the grant system is going to look it's going to look similar to your Perkins applications. It's going to have that main, table of contents sections page where you can navigate from, similar navigation to grant applications. Like I was saying before, it's got those 6 narrative sections, so I've bracketed those off in red there. So we're looking at size, scope, and quality of CTE offerings, CTE programs and programs of study. We're looking at labor markets. So in this section, we'd be looking at how your programs align to workforce needs in the state and regionally. Another section is on CTE professionals. So these are the instructors at your school. Another section is on access and equity. So this is how well you're serving those special populations of students, those non-traditional students. And then another narrative section is on that stakeholder engagement. So those are the narrative sections. Below that, you'll see that purple bracket of the data section. So each of those indicators, right? So 1S1, 2S1, etc. down the line, each one of those has their own section. Make sense? There is an instructions page up at the top section. I've highlighted that. So I'll send a lot of information out when the CLNA is opened. I'll share how to complete it. We'll share this training PowerPoint. But even when you're in the CLNA, you can go to that instructions page for how to complete it if you run into any issues. Okay, let's talk about how to complete the CLNA and what's required in order for us to approve it. So similar to a grant application, you all complete it and then this Maine DOE CTE team reviews it. So the best place to start before you even begin the CLNA, what I would recommend, especially if you're new, go look at the last CLNA. See it, so you'll be working on this in late winter of 2026, right? The last CLNA that was completed was in late winter of 2024. So it's been 2 years. right? Been 2 years since the FY25 CLNA. So go back and look at that. It's in the same location as it's an application supplement in the grant system. So go take a peek at that. It's a standing document, right? So I guess I should say this too. So the CLNA, once it's approved, can't be changed. It's not like an application. There's no budget section or anything. It's a supplement that it's locked in. So you can go back to your FY25 CLNA and see what was written there. You know, see what's changed. Look at your action steps. So we'll talk about what you do in sections and filling out your CLNA, but in your last CLNA, you filled out action items. You know, what were the challenges that, you know, certain programs face, and what were the action steps to approach those challenges? See if you actually implemented those action steps. What were the outcomes? So start with the last CLNA. And then I would also touch base with some of those school-wide stakeholders, right? It's probably, it might have been a while since you've had a full, you know, full meeting with all of those stakeholders together. It might be good to just give them a heads up that you're completing this CLNA. You know, you're doing the school-wide self-assessment, and it'd be good to touch base and talk about goals, talk about successes, talk about challenges. So start there. Okay, I want to go over the basic structure of each section. So I know this print is really small. It's just a screenshot from one of the sections, so don't worry about don't worry about reading it. But each section is going to have a really similar format. So there's going to be a top section that's going to have an explanation of what that section is. So this example is about size, scope, and quality of your CTE programming. So it's going to define what we mean by size, scope, and quality in terms of Perkins and in terms of CTE, right? And then in the middle section, there's going to be a series of statements. It's going to be different for each section depending on the topic of the section. You would read those statements very carefully and then select from the dropdown. If as of the date of your CLNA, if that statement is true and it's met, you can select established. If that statement is maybe true or you're working on it, you can select developing. And if that statement is not true or you haven't worked on it, you can select not demonstrated. Again, those statements are going to be different for each section. So for size, scope, and quality, an example statement might be enrollment numbers in approved programs justify the cost of the program. That would be, you know, if that's yes, you would select established. If not quite, you'd select developing. And if no, then you would select not demonstrated. Then below that middle section and the bottom section, this is the bulk of the work that you all are going to need to do for the CLNA. This is where you're going to have to write some things up. So the bottom section is where you're going to address successes, challenges, and action steps on this topic. So for each of those, you have to list between 3 and 5. So 3 to 5 successes, 3 to 5 challenges, 3 to 5 action steps. And it has to be related to the topic of the section, obviously. So for size, scope, and quality, you can talk about, you know, maybe the composition of your programming at your school. The enrollment in those programs, is it reflective of, you know, student interest, etc. I'm just saying some examples here, but something to keep in mind with these is you need to be specific and it needs to be substantive. Your responses need to be meaningful. At the bare minimum, if you do not put 3 minimum for each of these, we will send it back. Even if you're doing great, even if you're experiencing all successes, think hard. There's always room for improvement. This is supposed to be constructive criticism of yourself to improve CTE delivery for students and at your school, right? So dig deep, find those challenges. For each challenge, this is important to remember, for each challenge, there has to be a corresponding action step. So if you address a challenge, you can't just ignore that challenge and not address it in the action steps. So if there's a program that has really low enrollment numbers, let's say a welding program is struggling, in your action steps, you have to put how you're going to address that problem. For example, are you going to put some more efforts towards recruitment of that welding program specifically? Are you going to beef up the amount of, I don't know, live work opportunities or credentialing opportunities in that program as a way to get more students interested in that program? You know, doesn't I don't want to say it doesn't matter what the action step is. It has to be realistic, has to be substantive, but you have to address the challenge in an action step. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So that's the basic structure. We kind of talked about this a little bit, but in writing in front of you, 3 to 5 successes, challenges, and action steps for each section. Please be meaningful and as specific as you can with your responses. The CTE team, our entire team, reviews every single one of these. If you are not substantive, we're tough. We will flag it and we will send it back, right? It's not just because it's a requirement of the grant, but it's also meaningful to you, right? So we will send them back. Let's see. Oh, and then of course all sections need to be completed. So just before you submit, just double check, go through every section, make sure you answered everything sufficiently. Like I mentioned earlier, your accountability data, we're gonna have a separate training on that. That's thing one. Thing two is that your accountability data is going to be shared outside of the grant system. So if you remember, maybe in last year, Sean sent out each individualized spreadsheet to every single director with their accountability data. We're going to do something similar with that this year. So your responses to the accountability sections, they still go on the grant system, but you're going to have an actual Excel spreadsheet that breaks down all of your data. All that said, data might not be available for, not sure, I'm gonna touch base with Sean. We may open up the CLNA before the data is available to you. So just keep in mind, don't submit your CLNA until you've completed those data sections. Okay. Okay, some section specific guidance just to get into the, the content of what we're looking for. So we kind of did this in the example, but with size, scope, and quality of CTE offerings, I'm just going to list some questions for each of these and what you should be thinking about to get your mind going with how to think about these sections. So for size, scope, and quality, does the size or capacity of your CTE offerings reflect the population of students served? Are your spaces sufficient? Are your facilities sufficient? What's your enrollment like in programs? How's the staffing of these programs? Do CTE programs prepare students for the field, and do they lead to technical proficiency, right? Across the board, this is a very high level section. This is a school level section to be thinking about. You could think about, do the programs prepare students? I've got these questions twice. You could be thinking about the quality of packs. You could be thinking about student experiences at the school. So that's size, scope, and quality. Next section is on CTE programs and program of studies. So this is a bit more granular. Now we're going to the program level, right? You're going to be thinking about successes and challenges and action steps for specific programs. So, generally high level thinking, right? Are programs of study at your school aligned to industry standards and credentials? Are there multiple pathways for students post-graduation? Are there programs that are struggling in terms of curriculum delivery? Are there programs that are under enrolled? So this is where you can get specific. You don't have to address all of your programs in your responses. Maybe there's a couple that are doing really, really well. List those couple in the successes. Why are they doing well? There's a couple that are having some struggles for whatever reason, or there's challenges. You can just include those couple. You don't have to address all of your programs. Okay, labor markets. So this is where I would recommend that you go to Maine.gov's Center for Workforce Research and Information, CWRI. So this is linked directly in the CLNA. So when you pull up this section, the link will be there. So don't worry about needing to find it, but you can just type it into Google. But you're gonna take a look at labor market trends, essentially, in your region, in Maine. What pathways are in need of more workers in the state, which ones are trending, and see how your school aligns to that. Do you have some outdated programs maybe that have become more and more under enrolled over time? Whatever that means for you, if that means closing that program to align with workforce needs and the needs of your community, then that's something you can address. Maybe your programs align with labor market needs in the state. So this is a section for looking into that. CTE professionals. So this section is on the instructors at your school. So think about how CTE staff, if they are reflective of the makeup of your students. So, you could be thinking about special populations here. You could be thinking about non-trad. Do you have a woman as a welding instructor, let's say, or a man as an early childhood instructor? Just thinking about that, right? There's no requirements, but just thinking about recruitment of staff, how it reflects student body. Think about that recruitment process. Think about the quality of your instructors, how qualified they are, if everything's aligning to industry standards. Think about adequate credentialing as well for your instructors. This can be a trouble, a challenge for schools is Maine DOE credentialing, right? So I will say with your action steps, we want it to be substantive, and there is frustration, right, with getting CTE instructors the correct credentials, right? It's a struggle. Totally acknowledge that. Action steps have to be something within your control, though. We know the process is frustrating with Maine DOE. Having the action steps say, we want Maine DOE to do better with our CTE instructor certification, sorry, not credentialing, certification. Saying we want Maine DOE to do better with certification, we hear you. It's not an action step that's within your control, though. Think of what's within your local control. Also in this section, think about what professional development opportunities you have for instructors. Are they meaningful? Are all instructors having, equitable access to those opportunities? That's that section. Next section is on access and equity. So in Perkins terms, this is your special populations, right? So this is your non-traditional students. This is your economically disadvantaged students, homeless students, students with 504s and IEPs, and how well you're serving those students, right? So are there any identified barriers to student success for all students? Is there anything preventing all students with opportunity to succeed? This is also a good place to talk about accommodations. What types of accommodations you provide to students in your programs?
I would say this is an opportunity to look at that bigger definition of special populations, right? So it's not, like Melissa mentioned, it's not just you know, special ed qualifying students with IEPs or 504s. There's a list, right? It is those economically disadvantaged, and what are you doing to address those challenges and so forth. So really take that time to kind of look at that bigger picture and what you're doing at your school to help those, you know.
Yeah. Thanks, Dwight. That's a good point. And that list of special populations as defined by Perkins, that's also those are listed in your CLNA section. So those would be there for you to look at. All right, so there's two sections on stakeholders. So the first one has that same format of, the drop downs and the narrative response. And then another section is where you actually upload your list of stakeholders. So no need to include any personally identifiable information, right? You don't need to do phone numbers, but just do the person's name and then what organization they're part of. So you can do a manual entry. And again, this looks a little bit small, but your required stakeholders under Perkins can list them off for you. They're also included in the CLNA. This is, let's see, representatives from CTE programs, including instructors, guidance counselors, academic counselors, administration at your school. You also need to have post-secondary educational institutions as part of your stakeholders. There's no number, right? You just need to have someone from each of these categories. So post-secondary representative, someone from a local or state workforce development board, right? This could be, I don't know, Dwight, you may have better examples of what this might look like locally.
I would think in terms of so like a workforce board could be even like Chamber of Commerce, a local community development board. Many towns have those. So, I think it's looking, sometimes you got to look beyond just the specific language. But it's the biggest thing with this list is you want to get broader than just your advisory committee. That's the that's the big, that's the biggest thing is look beyond just your center advisory committee and your program advisory committees and you're reaching a little bit beyond, beyond that group.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So you'll also need representatives of special populations as one of the requirements. And for this is also something where you could work with community organizations, right? So if there's an organization that supports homeless or low income students, that would be a good person to have on your stakeholder list. There's a couple others as well. Again, these are listed. If you're having trouble identifying a stakeholder that meets these requirements, just reach out to us and we can talk about it. There's one in particular that's representative from Indian tribes or tribal organizations, and understand that this might not be possible or the most applicable to where you're located, right, and who you're serving. So just reach out to us to talk about it if you have questions. Okay. And then the last several sections are accountability data. So again, more information and training coming soon.
Yeah, and I will say, February, Sean's working on this, he's pulling this together,
Mhm,
double and triple checking it, wants it to be accurate, and we know it'll be a good conversation to have. So,
mhm,
I mean, part of it is he's cleaning it up, but by February, that'll be ready to go and present, and it'll be
yeah,
a good kind of, as we talked through it, it was like, well, let's just pull it out and do it in a completely separate. And I think folks will get more out of it and what it means and what the data means and how to be able to make that connection. So I
yeah,
think it works to split this up and so we'll do that in February.
Mhm. Definitely. Yeah, and Sean, he does such a great job with the data. In fact, the grant system isn't smart enough to show you all your disaggregated data in the way that we think is really meaningful. So what he does is he breaks down all of those indicators by not just by program and the, those numbers by program, but also by identity group too. So, male, female, those special populations. So it's a hefty bit of data that he gives you, but it's really granular, right? It really lets you see those trends over time. So, um, yeah, again, stay tuned for all that. Okay, that wraps it up. 30-minute training, not too bad. Do you all have any questions, or I can go back to, certain sections if you're confused by what's being asked of in each section? Feel free to just start talking too. No need to raise your hand. No.
I think some of the things, and Melissa shared them, and I'll emphasize with maybe if you got them sent back was just those, we're looking for 3 to 5. If you put 2, we're going to send it back, right? If you skip a stakeholder, we're going to send it back, right? So just, as you go through it, think about those pieces and getting that. And I know when we did this 2 years ago, for those of you that did it 2 years ago, I mean, we also were kind of scrambling a little bit and didn't provide as much of a detailed training as we're doing here today. So we're hoping to prevent some of that as you dive into this and begin to fill these out and kind of prevent some of that back and forth.
Hey, Dwight.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious of timeline. It's always always has a long tail, at least in Portland, in terms of collecting data just for the Perkins side of it, right? And to be able to access and write the application, then going through the process of approval. And then, it comes back to districts and we got to put it in our financial system. Is this, doing the CNLA, is that going to lengthen the process, or this has to be done before we get are told what our allotments are? What's sort of forgive the analogy, the batting order that we have to adhere to during this process?
Right.
Yep. Go ahead,
Right.
Melissa.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So the batting order is the CLNA happens every 2 years.
Right.
And it has to inform the next 2 fiscal years of your grants, right? So we've got FY27 applications coming out in normal time, right? They're going to come out in the spring, hopefully in May. Fingers crossed with the feds, all their changes, but business as usual is applications are released in the spring. We try to get the CLNA out to you all as early in the year as possible, the start of the calendar year, right? So it's January 6th. We're hoping to open up the CLNA by mid-January, right? Again, your accountability data might not be available for a couple weeks, but you can start working on it in mid-January. We're going to set a deadline to at end of February, so you have a month and a half to complete it. If you need an extension, just let me know. We're flexible with that. Your CLNA has to be approved before you can begin your Perkins application, though. So you can't let your CLNA go for months and months and months. It's got to be approved before you get your allotment and before you start doing your application. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Great. Anything else? Does anyone on the CTE team have any extra advice to give? Just because we all sort of learned as a team last year in reviewing these, and for us, it's a great opportunity to see the granular level at your schools, right? To really go through piece by piece. So, yeah, anyone on the CTE team have any advice?
We will make this available. So you can go back to it, or if you know, to your colleagues and so forth. So we'll make it available and for folks to go back and begin to start thinking about it and what the next steps are. So
Yeah, I think Emily's going to help us get this training recording on the website, and I'll send out the PowerPoint right after this meeting.
So
Okay.
good.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I think this has been great. As always, you can always reach out to me too outside of these trainings and office hours. I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye. Have a good week.